Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's May 24, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. And want to thank the whole world of Dominic Priori and Sponto Gallery and the Venice Heritage Museum for getting me in contact with our guest today, Kelly Kuvo. Where in the heck you calling in from, Kelly?
Venice, California.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Well, it's interesting because I was reading a little bit of your book I'm about halfway through when you start with that question. So I've actually, had a chance to kind of ponder that a little bit. So I don't know if that's cheating because it's not as spontaneous.
Not cheating at all. That's totally fine.
But it just made me realize how there are human beings that live really fulfilling lives. It made me think of the man who was in the iron lung as a child, but he had a really functioning brain, an active brain, and a support system, like a sustainable environment. So he led a pretty fulfilling life. He painted. I think he got a college education. And then on the opposite end, there are human beings that just lie in convalescent homes who have no active brain function. Their hearts work, their lungs work. A woman was impregnated and had to go through a pregnancy completely brain dead. And then the baby was born, and unbeknownst to her, because she was raped by some maniac who worked at the convalescent home. So obviously that as a human being that's not, I think that what you need is a functioning brain, no matter what. That's what you need. Having a healthy lungs and a heart just doesn't, that doesn't matter because you have no willpower.
I like functioning brain. I rarely get that answer. And I love the word you use, fulfilling life. In fact, it reminded me of a movie that I watched on TV as a kid that really affected me. It was called The Birdman of Alcatraz by Burt Lancaster, or starring Burt Lancaster. And it's about a guy who's in jail and he still connects with nature and birds through the bars on his cell. And it was like, wow, it really doesn't matter where you are. You can still have a fulfilling life in a way, however you define that. So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, I would have to say, I don't know. I like being the communication that's like nonverbal through I love it when animals try to communicate. You're not I like communication that isn't verbal, that isn't necessarily from human to human, but even when you're in nature or you're gardening, it feels like something's communicating to you, but you're just sensing it and you're trying to interpret it, and your interpretation could be totally wrong. but you're swimming and you see fishes and you can, like to think that the fish are trying to tell you something, but I like that kind of, I like to receive that kind of information, not necessarily with words or with a language, but just with gesture.
Really cool. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Honestly, I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I read a lot of science fiction. I got really, really into science fiction. And that was an alternative reality that made sense to me. And I remember one of the first science fiction stories I read that was basically suggesting that, we're alien offspring and we're just some social engineering experiment by another, beings from outer space, and that we do what we do because we're just we're an experiment.
Yeah.
So maybe we collect information because we're some sort of experiment by these alien scientists from another planet, and that's why. Because otherwise I don't really, we seem so foreign to this planet, the way we destroy it and the way we disrespect the planet and we take it for granted, that when I first heard about the reason why humans are so terrible on this planet is because we're not even supposed to be here. We're like a virus.
Wow.
we're a virus that's bad for this planet, that the planet is trying to kill us, to get rid of us through all these natural disasters, because we're not even supposed to be here. So when I think about that, I think like, well, we're creating information because we're just a social experiment by an alien race.
Yeah. No, that's and then let's go to reading sci-fi, Kelly. That was cool. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
Oh, I totally did it on my own. Like
Yeah.
I had two older half siblings, and then myself, and when I was a child, and now I have even two younger half siblings, but at the time I had two older, and my parents were really young. So like my mom had 4 kids under the age of 24. We're all babies. So she was totally overwhelmed. So there really wasn't a lot like of attention. Like I had to discover everything on my own. And so I remember the first time, like, so through school, thank God. I mean, like I like, thank God this, there was school and a school library. And because I was picking up anything I could read, like that was totally inappropriate for children, because, I was born in 69. My parents like just left things around, and whatever I could pick up, I would try reading. And I remember the first time I could read in my head, because I was trying to teach myself how to read, even like the TV guide, like, trying just, and I was in a bunk bed, because there was like 4 of us, 2 to a room. And I remember being in the bottom bunk, and I was looking at a magazine or a TV guide or something. And I remember I didn't have to say it out loud. And instead of being like 9 p.m., I remember I was just reading it in my head, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I just read that without like saying it out loud. And I ran to like try to tell somebody, and nobody cared.
But that is heavy reading TV guide. I mean, I had a class in college where TV guide was part of the required reading, and I always thought that was wild. I never wanted to throw out the TV guides that I had to have for my college class. But it is cool that you discovered that. That's very into this world of Finnegan's Wake and James Joyce, that reading aloud is something parents kind of do to kids before they're able to understand the words. They're looking at the words. But you sort of flipped it. You said, oh, I can have an internal dialogue with reading, as opposed to someone reading aloud to us, because we're almost prepped for Finnegan's Wake by.
Well, no one was reading aloud to me.
Yeah.
Like no one was reading aloud to me. If anybody was reading aloud to me, it might have been at school, or maybe very rarely, like maybe at, no, I was reading aloud to myself. Like I was, like I wasn't reading aloud with anybody else. Maybe my older siblings, we would read together, but no, like and also we were just like watching TV all the time. So if anything taught me how to read, it was like Sesame Street or children's television. So I might have been reading on the TV aloud, like with a TV show, like Follow the Bouncing Ball Along the Words and that kind of thing. So yeah.
But
so
the other interesting phenomenon with reading is, in general, whether you're a kid or an adult, you don't read out loud. In general, people read to themselves. So that was really cool. I'm glad you went into that. And then, why do you think this need or want for humans to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it just depends on the person, because some people, some people collect information because they hoard it. They're just like obsessed with it. And sometimes it's almost like, it's, like out of their control. So I don't know how to answer that question. Like, I guess it also depends on your age and your interests and what's available to you. I mean, if you're like growing up and surrounded by, you don't have written word, and everything's, a verbal communication, like like oral history, like everything you're trying to collect information based on memory, because you can't write it down. And, so, I mean, I guess that just kind of depends on like where you live and what your environment is like.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of what we're going to get into. That was good. Kelly, do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, I think so. If you're an emotional human being, I mean, I think there are some like people with brain problems, like sociopaths, who don't know how to have emotions, and they just mimic emotions to try to be normal, like, to respond normally. So no one realizes that they're not feeling anything emotionally. I mean, it depends on what kind of brain you have.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
Change my mind.
Oh, that was good. I rarely get that. Change my mind. So, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. And I mean, that's really, I'm getting this more and more. People go, I don't know what I think until I experience it, do it, or my favorite recently is research it or study it or rethink it, So I like that, change my mind. That's that really evokes a great McLuhan line. It goes, carefully make plans, then do the opposite.
Yeah, like one of my friends, I mean, her mantra is, you need a plan, the plan can change, but you need a plan, and then you can
Yeah.
go from there. So I don't think here comes the kitty cat.
Oh, that's all right.
This is Slick. Of course, the cats, you probably get that a lot. The cats always have to get in the.
We welcome cats, definitely. Can humans think without language?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Chomsky says the language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I think it's really instincts come into play, and that's where the like fight or flight reaction comes in, where um, you know you you need to communicate something, and the urgency of it. I mean, if you need to communicate something because there's danger or an emergency, or if it's um, like, or and if you're got any sort of um, if you're um, interested or not. Some people just aren't interested in communicating.
Right, right, right. Well,
Anything at all.
well, Kelly, do you think your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Again, I think it comes down to an individual's brain and how they were raised, and what's going on inside their brain. I mean, people are so different.
Yeah.
Everyone's so different. I mean, I met people who, I mean, like for myself, like I've worked jobs that were just like where there's no creative outlet. You're just like a robot. And I was just amazed that, like, I'm like, how can they, like my coworkers, some of my coworkers are really happy with this job. This job is literally like, it's like sucking the soul out of me. And I can't do it anymore because there's nothing fulfilling about it at all. It's literally just, it's like backbreaking work. It's mind numbing. And I feel like, like just upon, and like, you know, like I, and like there, but there are other people that like were just totally satisfied. They just want a job where it was just a physical labor, manual labor job. And that, you know, and if they had to do it 10 hours, 12 hours, and, you know, and like, and it was like, and I was amazed because I was like, wow, I am a completely different human being than that. Like
Yeah.
that is not, I can't do it. Like I literally, I cannot do that anymore. So I only lasted 2 months. That was with the U.S. Postal Service delivering mail, by the way.
Wow. And so that's amazing
They
because,
wanted me to work 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, no, it's 7 hours a day, like 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
oh my God.
And
Yeah,
and then you were hoping, like, and they were like, but you get so many hours in overtime. And I was like, man, that is not living for me. Like, I do not live to work. Like, that's crazy. But there were people who were totally satisfied with that. And I was just like, man, no, please, God, get me out of here.
Well, you're it's good because you're kind of putting things into context, and that's what I want. You put it into the context you want. And, you know, we invented the word thinking and feeling, and we think we can separate them, but we can't really separate them. In fact, these are two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Yeah, if you have a soul. Again,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of generalizing that everybody's the same. Like, you know, it's like there's so many people that, like, you know, who, for whatever reason, I mean, I've even felt like that with myself. Like, I've been around some very soulful people. Like, you know, I was an art teacher for 10 years, and I teach, you know, like, and as an art teacher, they would sometimes have me with like pre-K kids all the way up to high school. And we would have, you know, and I'd be around teachers that were just, you know, like so full of soul, and, you know, especially with the music and singing and dancing and cheering up the kids and stuff. And I remember being like, oh my God, like I am so uptight. I was so worried about, you know, like, like, and, you know, and I just remember thinking, man, I really need to like open up and like enjoy life more. And like, I mean, you know, like I've just been around people that were more soulful than me, and made me realize, like, you know, like I don't know, like I'm lacking in that sort of like wholesomeness that some creative people have, where they're just beaming with, like, full of life. They're just, you know, radiate joy. And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, I wish I could be like that, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well, at least you can articulate it, and everybody's different. And I appreciate the second Turing question is, can machines think?
I think so. I mean, I remember I took a class about synthesizers, and how to make your own synthesizer. And, you know, a lot of, you know, I know a lot of musicians that you know, they create their own synthesizers, and they're really, I mean, you know, they just start with a board and a bunch of wires and knobs and things, and they manage to, you know, like nail it all together and screw everything in, and then start making sounds. And then sometimes those, you know, like, you know, weird things like ghosts in the machines, you know, like unexplainable things seem to happen.
Yeah. I love that term, ghosts and machines. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I think happiness now. I think when I was younger, I was looking for meaning, but now that I'm 54, I think I've reached the point where happiness is more important to me now.
You know, it's funny because I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, but meaning does.
Well, as an artist, I mean, especially in the United States, you're not really encouraged, you know, to, you know, feel like it's meaningful to be a creative person.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well, you know what? Like, it's meaningful to me. And, because, like, and so I'm going to, and it, like, I've already decided, like, that's, I've got a meaningful life as a creative person, whether people appreciate my endeavors or not.
That's
So,
great.
and, there's a lot of, ups and downs that go with like trying to find meaning. And if no one else seems to be interested in what you think is meaningful, then, and then you're like, okay, it can make you, there's a lot of self-doubt and depression and like, oh my God, did I just waste, like, I thought this was meaningful to me. And like, did I just waste all this time doing all these things that mean nothing to anyone else but me? And then you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to be happy about it. So
That is cool. Kelly, it reminds me of one of my favorite Andy Warhol lines. He says, "Don't worry about what people think of your art. Just keep making it." And it's
yeah,
hard.
but it's
It's hard.
hard to do that around in this country when
Yeah,
it makes life, it makes it very difficult for
it's
you to
very hard
do.
to do.
It's not considered something to pursue, or unless you're you know you just happen to be born into a family that encourages that, and but that's not very, and supports it. And I know a few people who have had like really supportive lives where anytime they wanted to pursue something creative, like they had family support to back them up, like a safety net for that.
Yeah,
And but not everyone's so lucky.
that's
Yeah.
it. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I don't know. Like that kind of goes back to those people that are lying there in a coma in convalescent homes for years and years and years and years. Like, what's going on in
Yeah.
there? Is anything going on in there? I mean, did that woman who was raped and impregnated, like, did she have any idea that she had a baby that was like incubating inside of her? And like, who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a mysterious thing. I mean, and then there's people who have like I used to read Omni magazine and all those
Oh,
magazines
yeah.
that were just like scientific miracles. And like, there was a person who, half of his brain was just gel. Like, how come, but he was still functioning. Like he could still, and nobody knew until they took an x-ray and they saw that he only had like a partial amount of his brain that was working. You're just like, oh my God. So, like, I don't know. It's very people, brains are a very mysterious thing. And sometimes they're working when you'd least expect them to be working. So and if it's not like, if somehow if something's detached and your motor functions aren't connected there anymore and you're no longer able to speak or move, but it's something still going on. I mean, I know now, I guess there's enough technology where they can tell if there's enough signals happening within the neurotransmitters, if there's anything really going on inside or not.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's interesting because you kind of anticipate this. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I'm not a physicist, so
Just
I don't know the mechanics of that.
your hunch or your guess?
Well, what's thinking? Is it like plants? Thinking like plants communicate to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're connected by, I mean, like fungi is all connected in the ground. And so, like, I don't know, some things could probably think faster than the speed of light.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a poet, Audre Lorde, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Like a physical tool?
Well, that's it. You put the questions into the context you want. The question's really asking, what tool do you gravitate towards? Whether it's physical or not, doesn't matter. And
Well, I
you can
mean,
have,
it seems like it's a philosophical question. Like the master is like a chain, that and and you've got to break yourself away from whatever is dominating your life.
yeah, yeah,
And the tool would be just uh, a decision that they're not your master anymore. I mean,
right.
basically, you're just like you know, you just decide that like if the master is like in your head, that they're not in charge anymore. That
Yeah,
you're not my master. Like, but like, so I'm leaving.
I like that decision. So what new toy do you suggest?
Toy.
Yeah,
Um. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. Whenever I look for a new toy, I go to a thrift store, and then that way it's like you don't know what you're going to find until you find it,
I like that.
and then you just find some. You don't know what you're looking for, but you just go to the toy section, and then you end up finding something that's really cool.
That's a great open attitude. Kelly, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Uh, um, I don't know, just uh, trying to stay healthy, like making
Yeah,
healthy choices.
I like that. That's what I'm doing, trying. Okay, so McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound the poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Uh, well, I think because so many people um, want comfort, want what's
Yeah.
comfortable,
Yeah.
and they go to a lot of trouble to be as comfortable as possible, no matter
Yeah.
how much money they have to spend,
That's
and
it.
that's what people pay for.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
I don't know because there's so many different kinds of artists and art. I mean, there was there was a lot of shock art happening, and uh, like I think that all comes down to like that's what each individual artist has to answer for themselves. Like performance artists, like you know, harming animals in the name of art, that kind of thing, where you're just like,
Yeah.
who am I to judge? Except that I don't want to see that.
Yep.
So,
Well, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
uh, well, I mean, I think you have to know what's old because, like, otherwise, there's so many people who think that they're just reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
You know,
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
mm, I think one of my earliest memories was I managed to get out of like I lived in Illinois, in rural Illinois, up until I was about in like third grade. And so this was before kindergarten. And we lived near like some kind of creek, but it seemed really big to me because I was before kindergarten, so maybe I was like 3 years old.
Yeah.
2 or 3. Like I should not have been on in the house, leaving the house by myself at all. And I remember somehow I ended up walking down, and it was like a new development that was being built. So like there were some sidewalks and things, and like these little tiny track houses that were being built. And then there was just like a lot of land, because it was a lot of agricultural land that used to be cornfields or whatever that were being developed. So there's this creek, and I ended up like falling into it.
Wow.
And like floating down. And of course, nobody, like I said, disengaged parents. Like nobody noticed I was gone. Nobody noticed, like there was nobody around. And I remember I fell in and I kind of floated down for a little while. And then I got myself out. I was sopping wet. And I managed to and I remember being kind of disappointed because I was old enough to read, like Alice in Wonderland and all these kind of things where, like something amazing and fantastical happens. You end up down the rabbit hole, and then you see all these creatures, or like James and the Giant Peach, like these giant insects start talking to you. Right. And I was kind of disappointed because nothing fantastical happened whatsoever. And I have to like walk home. Like I managed to find my way home, sopping wet. I remember my pants were sopping. It was really difficult to because they were like jeans or something. They were sopping wet. And just being like, nobody noticed.
Yeah.
And I think I remember that because it was like, this was an omen. This is going to be how your life's going to be like from now on. No one's going to notice.
Do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
I think it's a blessing because I think you need to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, absolutely no one in my family. I didn't know about my great-great-grandmother until I was just about to start school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. All of the adults in my family up until that point were just not inspiring or supportive or interested in what I was doing or sharing anything about their lives. I mean, I don't remember them ever sharing anything. And then I remember I was on my way to Chicago to go to school, and my grandmother, born in Flint, Michigan.
Wow.
Elsie Arlene Sturdivant Richardson. She just happened to say, hey, you're going to art school, and we have an artist in the family. Your great grandmother, Jessie Colton Richardson. She showed me all these pictures of her and how she was in Billboard magazine. She wrote an article about rearing children in show business in Billboard magazine when it was still coming out of Ohio. And Jessie had like a traveling tent show. She was an actress, and she got all the kids involved. And she was a total modern woman, like a total modern woman in the 19th century. Like, it's amazing she wasn't tarred and feathered and, burnt at the stake because she had like she divorced, was already, before the time she married my great-great-grandfather, she had already been married and divorced twice. And she had several children from different men. And my great-great-grandfather was like 13 years younger than her. And she just lived her life she lived her life the way she wanted to. And, she couldn't vote. She had no rights. And she managed to live a creative life and raise her family and, and be an artist when, she had, really she could have, she must have been endured so much small town gossip, and she just kind of didn't get caught up in any of. I don't know. I'm just fascinated. I would love to know what was going through her mind and the mind of her relatives, because she was a wild woman, modern woman, living her life the way, without any of these restrictions of what a woman should and shouldn't do with their life. And so when my grandma Elsie showed me that, I was just dumbfounded. I was like, oh my God, you mean I'm not the only weirdo that wants to live life like that? I can't believe it. So that, I would say Jessie Colton Richardson. And so then I looked up like she's got an obituary that's in Billboard magazine, and I looked up the article that she wrote for them about raising children in show business, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I mean, I finally felt like someone like, I could relate to. But she was my great grandmother, like nobody, my grandparents, my parents, like there really isn't any inspiration from them at all. Like they really weren't interested.
Well, Kelly, the description was really vibrant because, I was born in Flint and raised there for 17 years, and it makes me proud to be a Flintstone, be from Flint with a history of someone there, because I do appreciate all the creative people who have come out of Flint. And so the same question outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Oh, well, Jessie didn't come out of Flint. I just should say she was actually from Indiana. My grandmother, who was not related to Jessie Colton Richardson, she's from Flint.
Oh, I see, your grandmother.
Yeah, and Jessie was related to my grandfather, Richardson. Yeah, Jessie Colton Richardson was related to my grandfather. My grandmother is a Sturdivant from Flint.
She's from Flint. Okay.
So yeah. And Jessie was born in Indiana and then somehow made her way over to Illinois. But I don't know, like say non-related. I guess maybe Isaac Asimov. Like when I remember.
What did you get from him, you think?
Well, I got his like Isaac Asimov science fiction stories, like the like little like pulp magazine booklet that you could get like a subscription to.
Yeah.
Or even like Mad Magazine and Cracked Magazine, like all the artists and writers in that. But I mean, like to take it to a deeper level, to like what like kind of made me realize like I could think deeper than that, like really like intellectually beyond like to be able to read like a Isaac Asimov book, like the Foundation trilogy when I was in high school, made me like, oh my God, like I'm not stupid if I can understand this.
Yeah.
He's a physicist. I mean, I have like a kind of dyslexic, I wasn't like diagnosed with a learning disability until college. So all through elementary school and high school, I didn't realize that I couldn't do calculations in my mind. I needed scrap paper.
Yeah.
In order to like do calculations with math and things. So I was terrible at math because I couldn't, like no calculators, blah, blah, blah. And even with writing, like with foreign language classes and stuff, I really needed to be able to like write things down on a piece of paper to kind of, so they went, because I had difficulties, they would be scrambled in my mind. So my grades were terrible, and I had to cheat through high school to graduate. And they put me in blue collar, like they had these track systems in the 80s where you either went on the college, prep, white collar track of curriculum through high school, or you were the blue collar kids who like, oh, you're going to go, be a mechanic or a hairstylist and that kind of thing. So they sent me to beauty school so that I got enough credits by getting my cosmetology license to graduate. So, like.
You explained it well because it's sort of full range. You said Isaac Asimov and like magazines like Cracked and Mad. So it's like
I mean, like, but like I would say Isaac Asimov just because like even though he was really smart, he wrote stories and made them accessible like at like Kmart. So you could find his like science fiction stories like on the shelf, like next to the comic books.
Yeah.
And so that's how I discovered him. And I read his books, and then like, some of them would be pretty simple and and easy. And then I was like, oh, but there's even more. And like, these are even more intense. And I think, so he kind of opened up a world to me. I mean, same like with like Carl Sagan on TV, too.
Yeah.
But I think as far as the written word goes, like I would say Isaac Asimov, because I remember just like reading his stories really early on, and it was more like, it blew my mind, and it was probably the more like intense like studies of of mankind and social like history and social engineering, all that kind of stuff. That was the first time I had ever like encountered anything like that.
Yeah.
And so and it kind of made me think like, okay, even though like I'm not doing great in school, I think like I can't be all that stupid if I can understand his books.
You did good there, because I can't wait to show. I'm going to send you. I made a short film called "I Am Not a Robot," and we have some footage of Isaac Asimov talking in the film, and it
Oh, wow.
really has some great. He really makes some great comments, and he was really a powerful writer. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, my mom was raised Catholic, but then she got a divorce after her shotgun wedding as a teenager. And so then she was excommunicated
Yeah.
the time I was born. That was with my two older sisters. So her wedding to my father, I think, was like Methodist.
Yeah.
And then after their divorce, we would go to church sometimes for like free daycare. Like she would take
Yeah.
us to church for like free daycare. But I remember having a conversation with my grandfather. Actually, I still have his Bible from World War II. And he completely wrote off Catholicism. He was a Polish Catholic, my grandfather on my mom's side, Grandpa Bistry.
Yeah.
And this was his his
Wow.
copper Bible that he would put in his pocket in World War II. Like, may this keep you safe from harm. And I've got like some of these prayer cards because like, we had, my grandma was Flemish. So I have some prayer cards in, that like from her French and Belgian family, and it's in French. And then, but and this is him, so this is his book of prayers from World War II.
I love
But
it. I love
when
holy
he,
cards too.
yeah, but when
Yeah.
he came back, he was just like, I'm never going back to church. So, and that was it. That's all he said. And then he spent a lot of time at the what are those bars that all the veterans of foreign wars, the VFW bar, getting drunk like the rest of his life. So so that was like that was a lot of disenchanted Catholics.
Yeah.
So I could, and also luckily I as a kid, like when my mom moved to Colorado in the 70s and early 70s, there was still, I mean, Colorado's gotten really conservative and weird, but when I moved to Colorado in like, I don't know, probably like in the late 70s, there's a lot of, like we had like a world religions class in middle school. There are a lot of, hippies and like teaching and introducing us to, a lot of different things. So I was exposed to world religions and alternative religions and Hare Krishnas and all that kind of stuff by the time I was in like fourth grade. So, and they just kind of like were like, find your way, like new age, all that kind of stuff. So it was always optional for me.
Do you pray?
Yeah, sometimes I do. Definitely. I have like a little altar and candles and things. I don't have a routine, but there are times when I feel, I have tarot cards, and so there are times when I feel like I need to pray.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I don't think there's like a God like that.
Yeah.
That's gonna like single me out and say something to me personally. I don't. I don't think that like that. Like, I'm not expecting anything like that.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Um, I think there's both. I think there's evil people that exist. Like, I think that do evil things. But I think that it's because they have some sort of mental disorder and they don't know what they're doing, and they might
Yeah.
not even be controlled by an evil thing. They're just like mentally ill. Like they're missing. They've got so many screws loose. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're damaging the things and other things, and what they're doing is evil, whether they know that what they're doing is evil or not. Like they're not even. They're just they're maniacs.
Yeah.
And then there's sometimes where like I've been in situations where things really felt evil, like there's like an evil presence, and
Yeah.
like something evil had happened there, or something where you're just like, oh my god, like this is like this has got a very evil vibe, and it's just telling me like to get out, like.
Yeah. Well,
So
how do
I
you
think there's two different versions of that.
two? It's good. Yeah, it's two. That's good. Because even though I say these either or, it doesn't mean it's one or the other. It's really me and you versus the wording on the question. So I really appreciate you sussing this out. It's not like you have to answer the question. It's just like a prompt. It's like the real hidden question there is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And again, I'll set up with a few thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question, Kelly, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I think that's a coping mechanism. I mean, when I was teaching, I was like, there was like a really weird, like office politics there, where people like were very competitive, and I noticed over the years, like even at different schools, they would always single someone out, like, and they, like that person like was the brunt of all these things. Like it was very weird. Like that person would be the one that would get bullied and end up getting, like fired, or a pink slip at the end of the year. It was very strange. And I remember there was a vice principal that was like suddenly like he decided like, like suddenly I was going to be like, I couldn't do anything right. And it's like, and I felt, at a point I was like, this guy is going to, like, I guess it was kind of like my enemy in that situation. And the only thing I could do as a coping mechanism was to just keep moving on. Like,
Yeah.
even if he was going to write me a terrible review, even if he was going to be saying things about me behind my back, to make me feel bad or whatever, tell me what a terrible teacher I was. My main goal and important thing was like to just like teach my students the best I could. And if I had a good rapport with them and they were telling me that what they enjoyed what I was teaching them, to just like, carry on and just deflect this like bad, crazy energy that that was happening. So, that was I didn't have a choice. The only thing I could do was to ignore him.
Yeah. Well, Nassim Taleb says games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. And my friend said, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. In fact, Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. A basic question is, does punishment work?
No, because I've seen people who think they're punishing something or someone, and they're really sort of like punishing themselves, because especially if it doesn't work, you're the only one who feels like you know, like I, like I'm doing this to try to punish this person. This person is completely oblivious to it or doesn't care. And the only one like that is pissed off is me because it's not working.
Yeah. It's
So,
funny because
I mean, it depends on like the punishment. Is it psychological punishment? Is it physical punishment?
yeah.
Is it like, giving a kid a bad grade? I mean, I can tell you how many kids I get who didn't do their schoolwork and I had to give them a bad grade and they could have, cared less. Like whatever. And I had to, but I still had to fill out the paperwork. I mean, the person like proving why they got the bad grade. The only one suffering was me.
Wow. Well, it's funny because I studied conflict resolution once, and I was like, why don't they teach this in grade school? But I learned that it's really basically you and the other person versus the problem. It's not you versus them.
Yeah, there was a cool thing I taught at this really great school that's a charter school in Altadena because I had to be a substitute teacher for 1 year here in California because I got my teaching certification at first in Maryland, and then in order to get your teacher certification in California, you need to do an ESL, English as a Second Language certification. So I had a sub for a year. So I subbed at all these different districts, Burbank, blah, blah, blah. And I was at this school in Altadena where all these parents from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory send their kids. And they had this really cool thing where, and it was elementary and middle, and they had this really cool thing where if the kids were arguing or like kind of fighting with each other, they had these two little footprints that faced each other, and then they had these little questions that were like in front of the footprint. It'd be like, okay, so you guys are going to communicate to each other, and these are like first graders, second graders. Like you're going to stand in front of each other, and you're going to ask each other these questions, like what is the problem? How do I, how does it make me feel? Or, what did I do wrong? How did I hurt your feelings or, whatever, like, what can we do to resolve this situation? And then shake hands. And like, you had to go through each step of these questions until you could shake hands. So you're like, both of them are in a timeout. So if a kid was accusing another kid of picking on them or, breaking their crayon or whatever, they had to go stand on these two little footprints and then ask each other these questions until they came to a resolution and shake hands. And they were responsible for doing that themselves, or they were in timeout until, they didn't figure it. So, and I thought that worked really well, but unfortunately that was the only school I ever saw that at.
Wow, because that's conflict resolution steps at least. And
yeah,
I actually met a woman who says, "Oh yeah, they do teach conflict resolution at schools now." So I wish
yeah.
it would. I wish it was required everywhere because it really would help.
Yeah.
So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, I mean, not everybody, like what if it's a film of a palm tree and you live somewhere where there's no palm trees and it's the first time you've ever saw a palm tree before?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a tree you've never seen before. You didn't even know existed. And then you're like, oh my God, like I want to go like see what I want to see a palm tree in real life, in my own life. Yeah. So, like, I think, there's reasons to document things so that to as evidence that they existed, but nowadays with AI, that doesn't really like ring true anymore because it could just be, a totally bogus tree that never existed. But then also, it's like you can, like, thing that's different about film is you can change the color and the tone, and you can, draw over it, scratch over it. So you can manipulate it without actually hurting the actual physical tree. You can like shoot a film of the tree and then like do all kinds of things to manipulate the image of the tree without actually harming it.
Yeah. It's like you see new things with new eyes. That was good. And so, Kelly, walk us through sort of your tipping points, because you sort of talked about your early childhood, getting into reading early, Isaac Asimov, and then, learning about going to art school. So, where's this tipping point where you said, I want to pursue art school? And, specifically, like, where you like, that's what I want to do, where's that tipping point?
Well, luckily, my school in Colorado was a really big high school called Cherry Creek High School. And it was nice and mixed of like well-to-do kids and not so well-to-do kids. So I was able to meet other kids that were going to go to college. And I didn't know anything about college. I didn't know how you got into college. Like I had that was not like, anything that was ever discussed with me because of my learning disability. They like my school counselor didn't see me as college potential at all. So they put me into cosmetology school. But I was friends with kids who were like middle class kids whose parents were engaged with them and what they wanted to do with their lives. And those kids were planning to go to college. So I like kind of vicariously, like kind of learn from them, like, would hang out with them and I'd like be like, well, what are you, so I got my cosmetology license at 17 when I graduated, but like, I didn't know anything about like how to, I didn't know what to do with it. And no one in my family was like, oh, so you got a cosmetology degree. That's amazing. Let's like, maybe you should take some business school or, like, what are you going to do with it? Like there was none of that. So, and my friends were all going to go to college. So I was like, well, I want to do what my friends are doing because none of my friends are going to go work at a hair salon. They're going to college.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I could go to do a hair later. And like, and then and I was like, it was cool. Like, I'm not saying like my cosmetology degree was awesome because I learned how to, like, it was like in the 80s. So, I was doing all these punk rock and new wave hairstyles for all my friends. It was amazing. It was amazing. But like none of my friends were doing it. Like my close friends were all going to go to college. So, one of the first things I did is, like when I, like right after I graduated from high school when I was 17, I moved to downtown Denver and I got a job. And some of my friends were going to go to the community college there. And some of my other friends went to like Parsons in New York City or Kansas City Art Institute. So I just saved up money and I took a bus to Kansas City and I visited my friends that and actually some of my friends, even before I moved out of the house, before I graduated from high school, some friends who graduated ahead of me that were like 2 years older than me. I remember I was working like as a dishwasher at Coco's restaurant when I was in high school, and I'd save up money. And I remember I bought a Greyhound bus ticket to Kansas City, and I visited my friend Ann Such, who was going to Kansas City Art Institute. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. And then I went to New York City and visited my friend Julie Sunday, who went to Parsons. And I was like blown away by New York City in it was, in the 80s. I was like, oh my God, like I'm not ready for this. This is way too, like, I was not ready for New York City in 1987.
Yeah.
So I came back. But some of my other friends went to Metro State and they took art classes, and I was like, okay, I can do. And it was, like community college. I think if you paid like $2 a semester, so it was something that, and that was like back in the day when like I was working a minimum wage job and I could still afford to pay rent and go to and pay tuition without getting into any kind of huge debt. And take community college art classes. Like it was totally affordable on my own, like no trust fund, no parental like safety net. Like this was it. Like I was working minimum wage, riding my bike or walking everywhere. And so I took art classes at Metro State College. Also, I took like philosophy classes and, like all these things that, open up my eyes to the world. And that's when while I was there, and then I started working at, I started getting interested in film because while I was living downtown Denver, like I was working at like, you know, some stupid mall cart that was selling betta fish. And then I ended up by being downtown and going to like punk shows and you know, music shows and stuff. I met some friends who were working for the landmark theaters. So there was the Palace Theater and the Mayan and the Ogden, and all the cool kids worked at those like art film theaters. And I was like, I have to get a job there. Like I have to. And that introduced me to the world of independent cinema, and where I, you know, and I had started going to those theaters even in high school. My friends had cars, and we would drive from, you know, downtown Denver to go to see, you know, like all the independent films that would be showing at these art house movie theaters. And I always wanted to work there. And then when I finally lived downtown Denver, I started working there, and it totally opened my eyes to independent film. And also there was Wax Trax, and Wax Trax had a video store that was, you know, full of all these different independent, you know, and when it was like, you know, like I remember, like, it's so crazy now because you can watch every episode of that gothic soap opera that I'm spacing out on, Dark Shadows. But at the time, in like the late 80s, like it was, you know, like, oh my God, you can rent Dark Shadows at Wax Trax Video, because it was like impossible to find unless somebody had taped it off the TV. Or like, even then, like, you know, like how did anybody tape it off the TV? Because nobody had VCR tape recorders, you know, when it was airing on TV. So anyway, like, you know, like, so all this, you know, so I just became friends with all the local artists and local musicians and stuff there. And I remember there was a guy that was a little bit older who had an art studio. And I remember, like, I don't know, just saying, like, I would buy comic books and stuff. And this guy, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to I'd like to go to Chicago. I'd like to transfer. I don't remember how that started or what sparked in my head. But I think, you know, somehow, some way, someone was like, well, you know, like you can take these credits that you're getting at this community college and transfer to another art school in Chicago. So I just, like, on a whim, I put together an application to transfer to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And the artist, like, took slides of my work, you know, with a film camera. And helped me, you know, if it wasn't for him, I would have never gotten that done. I had no idea how to take pictures of my art and turn them into slides and then submit them snail mail to the Artists of Chicago. But so I managed to pull that together and submit it, and then I got accepted. So then I went to Chicago, and I felt a little bit, you know, I still had family in Illinois, so I felt like, you know, like, just in case everything fell apart, I could take the Greyhound bus to my grandparents.
Right.
Figure out what I was going to do next.
But Kelly, you've pursued several mediums over the years, and, you know, we've had some talks about experimental film, and, you know, studying with Tom Palazzola, who is a huge part of the Ann Arbor Film Festival, which is the oldest experimental film festival in the world. And we've talked about all these other film artists that you've known, and Ross Lippman, etc. Your recent show in Venice is with, what do you call that three-dimensional sculpture, or through shag rug? What do you call that medium that you're working with, that you're exhibiting at Small World right now?
Fiber art.
Okay, fiber art. Yeah.
But then in the collage, or like repurposed materials, recycled art.
Let's go with that. With collage and fiber arts, a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're making one of your fiber art pieces or your collages, what role does intention play in your creative process?
I guess, I mean, I think my realization that you can repurpose like thrown away things actually even started in Chicago. Because it was pretty traditional in Denver. We learned like printmaking and painting and things, but it wasn't until I went to Chicago and I took film classes, and remember there was like this cabinet full of just like random clips, like film, like just pile. It wasn't even in a reel, like all this like old film, like 16 millimeter film, 8 millimeter film. And they would be like, make something interesting out of this. You're going to splice it together. And, you know, I remember and sometimes it was just audio. And I remember they showed us this really cool film. It was called Johnny, 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 that this filmmaker had made. And it was just, I guess you call them flicker films. It was just light and like, sometimes like whatever was scribbled, because the only thing that was like consistent, like this person had spliced together the audio track of different films where somebody had said Johnny. Yeah. So you'd hear like from like a Western or whatever, they found like old film reels that had some character named Johnny. And whenever somebody said the name Johnny, they just spliced together Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. Yeah. But there was no like image. It was, but maybe scratches or like, writing, something. That's it. So, I was like, oh my God. Like, that is like really cool. I cannot believe you can do that. It doesn't have, it's so not traditional. Like, you mean that I could do that? And, I'm not spending a fortune on film and developing. I mean, they had us like shoot our own film. And I remember like developing it in my bathtub and all that kind of stuff. And I can't believe, because they're like, I can't believe I don't have cancer yet, because I was like, but same with photography and printmaking and everything else. Like I was using all these horrible chemicals with no mask or whatever. And I was like developing film and with my bare hands. So, I guess when going back to that question about like, what are you afraid of when you go to sleep at night? I'm like, oh my God, like all the materials I was exposed to in art school that I didn't have like gloves and a mask on. I can't, is it ever going to come back to haunt me? So like, like the coolest thing about, and I'd like to think that the School of the Art Institute of Chicago is still like this, because I know it's really corporate now. And I got there just in time when it was really, affordable and loose, and, you didn't, and it wasn't corporate, and like the film teachers were like, like very, like, just like, like made it accessible. Like, okay, so you want to make a film and you don't have any freaking money? Well, you don't need any money, because all these idiots, we can dumpster dive. I mean, you can dumpster dive, like all these like corporations and like industrial places. It's like, people were like finding film reels that had been thrown in the dumpster and pulling it out and taking it to the Art Institute of Chicago. And it's like, hey, we can use this as material. Like, so I learned about dumpster diving and recycling and repurposing stuff that would have otherwise have been labeled, uninteresting or garbage. Yeah. And then you can turn it into art. And so, and I learned that in 1989 by like all this industrial film footage and stuff. I was like, no, you can, and then like, hey, and if somebody wants to tell you that's not art, just tell them you're in art school, asshole. So that makes it art, because you're in art school.
You don't even have to use the word arts, asshole. You can just say I'm an art student, because all you have to do is call it. But, it's funny because Duchamp is one of the pioneers of that. He said the artists of the future will only have to point. He said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer when you're making a fiber art piece or doing a public access TV show or doing a piece of music?
How much am I thinking of the audience?
Of the user, like the consumer.
Oh, well, like my cable access TV shows were all about the consumer.
Who was going to view it.
I knew that the entire city of Chicago, because at the time there's only a few cable channels. Yeah. So in 1990, 1991, 1992, it was a massive audience. I think there was like, you had your regular channels, and I think it went up to like maybe channel 25. Yeah. And that's it. So I knew, and I wasn't a big TV watcher, but I just knew from other people telling me that, and also we made a TV, I remember, I think we made something for cable access TV for, in Tom Palazzolo's class. And also I was an intern for a show called Wild Chicago. I remember there was like an index card, and I was looking for, because I had to work and go to school at the same time. So I was working for the media center, and I was trying to find paid internships and things. And there was a PBS TV show called Wild Chicago that was like a really fun kind of like Huell Hauser, but like a crazy Huell Hauser guy that would go around. And I was an intern on that show, and so I just realized like how fun it would be to like do something really, and like when I realized through cable access TV, and I think maybe one of my teachers, I'm not sure, like I know my video teachers, like the very traditional, like, art is only in a gallery. Like if you're going to make video art, it's not art unless it's in a gallery. And, and the same with film, like it's not art unless it's like in an, like at a film festival.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And I would just remember, I don't know, like there was some other people who encouraged me enough to be like, like, why can't, and like, there'd still be like, independent, like arty things on TV, so I'd be like, I don't see why we can't do something weird and arty and put it on TV. Like, wouldn't that be awesome to do that? So
public access was so beautiful that the U.S. government said, no, we want to give everybody a chance to make TV. And they didn't tell you you can't do that on public access.
Yeah. So, I mean, like
that was
and, and there's like, and there were so many kids that I was going to school with that were interested. I mean, it was not like, I couldn't have done it alone. Like it was a total, group effort. And Tom Palazzolo, he like made sure everything was like a group effort. I remember he brought in, like some people that were from like a halfway house or something like that, and they had written a play, and it was like art therapy, and they acted for us in front of the camera. But I mean, but they were like clearly like really strung out, like in rehab, and I feel like maybe that was for some kind of something that he was going to put on cable access. I can't remember who initially introduced me into cable access, but it was definitely like Tom Palazzolo was definitely a renegade teacher at school, because there were some very traditionalist teachers who, and I think maybe that might have been the last year that he taught there, but he was definitely like very rogue about things. And thank God, because he was like, for someone like me, he really was, and his classes were really popular because he really like was totally different than what everyone else was teaching us. Like a lot of teachers, I mean, there were a few other teachers that were like that were really like free thinkers and had and open-minded, and they weren't acting like they were like competitive with you. They were really supportive and embracing and encouraging. Yeah. And they didn't act like know-it-alls. I mean, Tom definitely felt like, like it felt like he was like wanting to learn from you as a student. Like we were all learning together. Like we're all in this, like, there's, you don't know everything, and like he was interested to see what we would teach him, and there's very few teachers that are like that. So, so I think with the, I still like to this day, like to repurpose materials. So that the art that I have on display now at Small World Books was just an extension of that came from the pandemic and being stuck at home. And then, just like trying to figure out like, okay, well, what's the most affordable art supplies and materials that I can have access to now? And it was either unused or, like a lot of yarn, like a lot of people start yarn projects that never finish it, or his grandma has a closet full of yarn and she's died and now the family's trying to get rid of it. So I went on eBay to see what was the cheapest stuff I could find. And I could find really cheap and blacklight posters from the 60s and 70s because they were ripped, because they're very collectible, but only if they're in mint condition. And so, I was on the internet a lot, just kind of looking at stuff. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I was looking up. I mean, it's because I've always I remember when head shops were closing left and right, like in Chicago and in Denver, there would always be like a head shop. And then for some reason, I don't know what, I guess politics or the drug war. I don't know what was behind it, but a lot of the head shops were closing down, and so they were literally like giving away these like posters. And I remember in the late 90s, early aughts, I had a job where I was like doing as a travel writer, and so I would look for all the old head shops and write about them. And that it was for this site that was supposed to be called Supersphere that it never took off. It was like an internet startup company in 1999. So I did that. I was supposed to be like a content manager and a writer. That was supposed to like kind of be like a city search kind of guide, like a travel guide, and that was the internet startup. So it was about like interesting things to find and do in Chicago or in New York City. So I like looked for all the head shops, and and they were and so much of that stuff was super cheap. Like it was uncool. Like nobody wanted a blacklight poster in 1999. So I just started buying them because I was like, wow, these are amazing. So I started buying them, and they started to fall apart, and some of them ripped. But I was like, they're just too beautiful to throw away. So I just started acquiring more and more and more. And I was like, I'm going to start collaging them together, and this would be kind of interesting. And so that's kind of how it started, where it's like, well, I've got half of this one and a part of this one. And also I wanted, since so many of them from like the 60s were kind of misogynistic and very like heterosexual, I was like, these need an upgrade. They need to be upgraded to the 21st century, where it's not like, like man and woman, like more men are having sex with each other, women are having sex with each other. These like sex position posters from 1960 are irrelevant because it's for a man and a woman. Like these like, astrological zodiac sex positions are totally irrelevant in the 21st century, because it's not just a man and woman. So I was like, I'm going to like manipulate that. And so I just like, so I started to kind of like try to do like a feminist like upgrade to all these like sort of like male gaze, like intended audience blacklight posters from the 60s, so I did that with the blacklight posters. And then, with the Latchik rugs, it was like, well, like they were like with the shipping was more expensive than actually buying any of the materials. So it was like, so I just accumulated all these really cheap like art materials to use while I was sitting at home during, the pandemic.
But again, Kelly, that was really articulate, and you gave me a good picture. But when you make your fiber art piece or your collage, blacklight poster collage, how much are you thinking of your viewer or because I understand with your public access show, you're thinking of your viewer. How much are you thinking of your viewer when you're making your physical art pieces?
Well, there's a lot of nostalgia for people who see the collage posters and the Latchik. And the Latchik is also could be personalized because they're based on people's zodiac signs. So even though I don't have a personal connection with like a Sagittarius and a Taurus, because I'm a Libra, Cancer, rising, Pisces moon, but like I love the design of the constellations in conjunction with like the symbolism of like the scales or the bull, or and so I kind of mix up my designs based on like the sacred geometry and the constellations of the sign of the zodiac sign, and also some of the symbols, and I kind of create a design and the colors and the like that are associated with these zodiac signs, and the elements, water, fire, earth, that kind of thing. And so I put all that in there. And then what's interesting for me is to find a person who the sign, to like I'll find out from a friend, like, hey, I happen to be that sign.
Right.
And then I'll send them the pillow and it matches their decor so there's like a really cool kind of like element to meeting someone who's like an Aries, and and also like, and especially if it's a couple like that's married and like they're an Aries and a Libra, and I show them the pillow and they're like, oh my God, that that totally matches our interior of our house. Like that's so crazy. What a crazy coincidence that this kind of, we can relate to this.
Yeah.
So, so like a lot of people who, it's like unintentionally, like it's interesting for me to create. And then it's also really interesting to see how people who have those zodiac signs relate, how they attach themselves to that pillow. They're like, oh my God, this like, like this like is me, and pillow, like abstract pillow latch hook design. Like I love those colors, I love the design, and that's me. And as abstract, like zodiac latch hook rug pillow form, and then they can give themselves a hug by having the pillow. So it's way of it's so people who have those, so people, that's how people connect to that, my zodiac work. Yeah.
And then you also got into music making. So you've worked in so many different mediums. What role does intention play in your creative process as a musician and forming your bands?
Well, when I found out, like my dad has always been in bar bands, and I had no idea. Like I said, like there wasn't a lot of communication with my family. And like my grandfather, my dad's father on my dad's side, he worked as like a civil servant, like at the DMV. Like I had no idea I had creative people in my family. His father, my great grandfather, was a professional musician. I had
Wow.
no idea. He, like, all he did was travel around in big bands, because his father was Jesse Colton's husband, and they that's all they did. They were like professional artists and musicians.
Yeah.
And so my great grandfather could play everything by, he didn't even have to, he could play everything by ear. Like he didn't even have to read sheet music. He was like this, like kind of autistic, like when it came to like music. I had no idea. So when I found out, like once I like became, like a 19-year-old, that I had artistic people in my family, I thought, oh, well, maybe I have some sort of musical talent, which I don't. I did not inherit any musical talent. But I thought, well, if other people, and my grandfather, on the World War II veteran, on my mom's side, he was also an organist. He also played music. But they didn't encourage any of us to like pursue music lessons or anything like that. But so when I was 19, I thought, well, maybe something in my DNA might come out that is musically inclined. And I had some friends. I went to I lived in this like neighborhood in Chicago that was full of artists and musicians, and like the Hot House, which is jazz club, was there, and there's a bunch of like underground music venues there. And so I was introduced to a lot of different music, and even experimental music. And I met some other people who like were musicians who, like at the time, like I was learning also about outsider artists. And, it was like, and like for a lot of us art students, it was like, kind of an epiphany to be like, you mean now I'm uncool because I went to art school and I should have just been sitting at home in my basement, like teaching myself how to do art. And to be an outsider. Yeah, like I should have been a self-taught artist all this time and saved myself a lot of time and money for tuition, because now everybody, like I have an R.A. Miller painting that my friend Casey got me from Georgia. He's like an outsider artist who just painted on like scrap metal and would sell it in his front yard. Like everybody wanted self-taught outsider art in the 90s, and suddenly being an artist that like went to art school is totally lame. So I was like, well, how can I be an outsider artist? Because I'm already doomed, because I already went to art school, right? So because I graduated from the School of the Art Institute in 1992. So I was like, well, I could be a really bad musician because I had no idea how to play. And there seemed to be a lot of talented musicians in Chicago who wanted to play music with people who did not know what they were doing.
Right.
I don't know why they wanted to do that, but it was a thing.
Yeah.
So I would be invited to like, and there were a lot of musicians, and there were a lot of trust fund kids that I went to school with who had access to like, money to buy stuff. So I remember being invited, and so I became a roommate of some people, like a bunch of artists. There was a practice space there, and they were like, you can just go in there and, goof around with some of the guitars and instruments and things like that. And also, we were watching like experimental musicians who were like, uh, like, not really playing. I can't, musicians that don't, none of them are coming to mind, but, who would just like drone the same note over and over and over again, or like unstring the guitar and then string it back up.
Yeah.
Things like that, where they weren't really, they were like using the instrument as like a tool to make noise.
Yeah.
And not play notes or chords or that kind of thing. So I was like being introduced to all these experimental musicians who are kind of doing the same thing as like, where we'd be shown a big pile of film scraps and be like, edit together and it's art. Make some, if it's, make it interesting. And so it was kind of like, here's some instruments, like make some noise and see what happens. And so that's kind of how I got into music, was, well, you'll learn as you go. Like you don't have, like, rather than you'll be practicing on stage in front of an audience. And that's pretty much all I did, was like, I was practicing. Like I never really had time to practice. I looked at a few sheets of chords, and I did take, like a few lessons on how to play like guitar and acoustic guitar. I took choir in middle school and high school. So I kind of knew what sheet music looked like and that kind of thing. But I mean, like, I kind of just, it like got like thrown into the fire, where it was like, let's like just like get together and play music and try to come up with some songs. And you're just going to like take the guitar and try to make something interesting out with it. And then we'll call it a song. And that's how I got it.
Really, let me ask you, because it's very interesting you brought that up, because Leonard Cohen says the only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. So, I mean, what role did risk play in courage in that regard? Because it seemed as though, you have a vision with your art, and you see the other people making art, and then you have some sort of exposure to experimental music, which something I've dabbled in and been involved in listening and making for many years. But how did you find the courage to do that, and what role did risk play?
I don't know. Like I am terrible. Like the few occasions where I've recently tried to do public speaking, I was like really nervous and like shaking the whole time. So when I think back to the fact that I used to like go in front of an audience and be comfortable, I'm like really amazed. I guess I felt really comfortable with everyone who was there. Like I felt safe. And also I felt like I really had a lot of faith in the musicians that I was on stage with, because I knew like even if I was terrible, they were really good. So hopefully no one's listening to me sound terrible, and everyone's listening to them sound good.
So it was
I cringe. Like sometimes I'll listen to some of the recordings of that I'm on, and I'm just like, oh.
But it was collaborative. It's basically community finding some commonality and interest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was a huge fan. Like I was a super fan, and I think I was always very enthusiastic. And I think people realized, like they saw how curious I was and how kind of fearless I was, because I was like, "What are you doing?" And I want to be involved, and what you're doing is so great. And like I really wasn't, and I guess I was just really naive. I was even like that when I was in high school. We would, like my mom gave me a fake ID. So when I was 16, it said I was 21. And so I would go to all these concerts, and I was constantly, like trying to meet the musicians, the bands, and just learn about like, how did this happen? Like, how did you get to where you are? And like, what were, like, how did I want to live your life. So how did you make this happen for yourself? Yeah. And so in Chicago, I just like, would just like navigate towards anyone that I thought was doing something interesting that I wanted to help participate in. Because, also, I think I just realized, you've only got a limited time to get things done.
Yeah.
So you got to do it. You got to do it now. Like, so like, and I just felt like, you know, like there was a lot of really interesting things happening, and I wanted to participate. And some people would be like, oh, well, you just like, you know, riding on other people's coattails and stuff, and, you know, or coattails and things. Like, you know, I've had some people criticize me for like, you know, like always being like a participant, or, you know, but not like being someone that does my own thing. And and it's interesting because I think like, well, I mean, like, what's wrong with that? Like I, you know, like I think if, you know, someone has an idea with something and you want to participate and support that, like, I don't see what's wrong with that. You know, like, like, even if you say you're a solo artist, like, not everything, you're not doing everything by yourself, you know, like, I don't know. So,
There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I was bringing up, the word courage. It's the courage to take a risk and delve into it and have it. So, you know, Kelly, I asked for 90 minutes, already 90 minutes, but
oh,
I have to do one little thing and turn on my oven, but I have one more question we can close out with. Hold on for 1 second. Sorry about that. So anyways, yeah, let's schedule a part 2, maybe 3-4 months down the line, and we can get more into the rest of my questions, because we only got through some of them, and it's really been fun because I like these deep delves into people's philosophies in the creative process. And it's funny because this question goes along with what you just talked about, and it's based from a woman from Chicago, and her name was Viola Spolin, and she sort of helped invent comedy improv. She was a social worker who did these role playing exercises, and it sort of spawned Second City, Saturday Night Live, and all the groundlings. And her comment was, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. So, what role has struggle played in your creative process?
just have to, like, a sense of accomplishment, like I accomplished something,
Yeah.
you know, like, it's a struggle to do something that you feel proud of. So just kind of, you know, and especially if it doesn't come easy. So just to, you know, I think just to feel like I've accomplished something that, you know, I'm like, I can look back at and be like, oh, wow, that was pretty good. Like, that was hard. That was hard to do. That was really hard to do. But oh my God, I can't believe I got it done.
But where's the roots of your courage to like persevere through it? I mean, everybody, you know, finds some sort of path that they want to pursue, but you know, sometimes it's hard. How what's the roots of your, it's sort of like a work ethic too. I mean, I often ask people, where'd you get your work ethic? And they say their parents. Then you look up work ethic in Wikipedia, and about the third paragraph down, it says, this could be a scam from consumer culture. But it's sort of like, you know, where are we driven? Because like, I'm close to what you've done. You know, I'm not like this, you know, super highbrow big time artist, but I love to make art, and it doesn't matter if I get a big accomplishment or a big gallery show or a museum show, but there's something about it that drives us, you
Well,
know?
I mean, I studied art therapy. I've always been really interested in art, like therapy as therapy. That's
Yeah.
why I ended up going to graduate school, because when I first moved to LA in 2000, I had come and visited in the 90s. And me and my band came and toured here in the 90s. And I had friends from Chicago who graduated with me in 92 who moved to LA. So I'd visited LA, but I hadn't actually moved here until the year 2000. And one of the first jobs I got was at a halfway house for mentally ill adults called the Villa Stanley. There's the Villa Stanley East. The Villa Stanley East was on La Brea and Melrose, and then there's also the Villa Stanley that's on Stanley Street, like Stanley and Beverly. But I was at the Villa Stanley East, and I was the like activity director. And so we would do art and poetry, and then we'd walk up the street to the bowling alley, which is now closed, and things like that. And that got me, and so I started reading books on like art as therapy, and like art as just like getting it all out, releasing stress, like whatever. And so that kind of like lit a light bulb over my head, because I'd be like, so why am I like spending like money doing this? Like when I could be saving this money for my rent.
Yeah.
And I just, and so that kind of, and I realized like, it's just very therapeutic for me. Like it was very therapeutic for me to sit down and like make these hook rugs. I mean, it's very tedious, monotonous work, but it was also very meditative to like just, and I learned about like art that is just meditation. And it made me a more of a appreciative of art that you're supposed to look at and as a meditative device.
Yes.
So I think it's therapeutic for some. I mean, and I remember I had teachers who were just who said that was just like, that made them want to puke, like the idea of art as therapy. They just like it was against everything that I don't know. I found it very weird that they were. When I was at NYU, I was taking studio art classes and art therapy classes. They were totally separate departments, and they were, the art department was just very, like, against, like trying to connect the two. It was very bizarre.
Yeah.
And so, and I was like, why did I even go to the school? Because it was not like, it was very structure and like, institution. But I think it's like, whether an artist wants to admit it or not, I think they're getting a therapeutic release from it.
Oh,
that's the struggle.
I totally agree, because I really want to go deeper into this whole art thing in part 2, because one comment we could actually end with now is Mike Kelly said, art is making your problems other people's problems. Now, that's an interesting comment. I don't know if you want to comment on that. What do you think of that line?
I would disagree with it. I mean, there's you can walk away from someone's art.
Yeah.
You can walk away from it.
That's it. Yeah.
So I would disagree with that statement.
And it is, art is making, people have said art is making your joy other people's joy, or art is making your questions and inquires other people's questions and inquires. I mean, I like what you said about the tree, which is, the cover of my book is, we didn't even know that, but one of my questions is, why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I go outside and see a real tree? Mm-hmm. And then you see this guy's eyesight on the cover. It's from a Jay Rosenblatt film. And we didn't even realize that question corresponded to the cover. But when you said, well, if you live in a land where there's no palm trees and you go and see a movie of trees and their palm trees, it's enabling you to see something new that you normally don't see. So it is a process of, like, I call art almost a magic carpet ride. It can take you, to other lands, or the word I liked you used earlier was what Isaac Asimov was going into, the fantasy kind of, or, things that you don't see in front of you, and it increases our scope on what's out there in the world, in the verbal and the nonverbal, or the physical and the non-physical,
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, Kelly, it's sure been fun. I really appreciate your time, and I learned a lot. And I hope we can plan a part 2 somewhere down the road. So even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Thank you so much. It was fun. It was definitely fun.
Thanks, Kelly. See you soon.
Okay.